The next morning, in time for dawn's first grey smear above the treetops, they advanced towards the forest immediately overlooking the camp. Almost like a Roman legion themselves. At the forefront, Jim and the other security guards, scanning trees and bushes for trouble. Behind them, Big Sandy and his team of lads, chainsaws at the ready. And behind them, the serious hardware. JCBs, diggers, bulldozers, earth movers. And the big brute of a vehicle the boys in the camp had nicknamed Godzilla. A great yellow tank of a thing with an articulated arm and a claw at the end, shaped for seizing whole tree trunks. But first the chainsaw boys had to cut a path for these larger vehicles through the smaller bushes and more stunted, knottier trees. And so it went for the first little while. Sandy's team buzzing their way through trunks and branches, raising great yellow clouds of sawdust, toppling one obstacle after another and dragging it aside, the heavier machinery grinding in as soon as it could. Before long, that great hydraulic claw on Godzilla was flipping itself upright, clamping itself around the larger tree trunks, the saw contained within it severing in seconds the trunk from its roots. The trunk was then raised, flipped horizontal, and then swiftly drawn its whole length through the claw, sheared of every branch as it went through, and sawed into smaller logs at regular intervals. Within little more than half an hour, the forest density had begun to visibly retreat before them, like a wounded beast. The eyes of the security team fastening on no hint of resistance. Perhaps, in consequence, guard had been let down a little when the blunt wooden shaft came rocketing out of the forest depths, smacking into Jim's chest, knocking breath out of him and his feet from beneath him. He had, fortunately, taken Hardigan's advice and worn body armour, so he was no better nor worse than winded, and helped to his feet by a couple of the other guards, even as he gasped his breath back, watering eyes noting the length of blunt, planed branch which had been fired at him, and which now lay alongside him on the forest floor, noting also the flit of a figure in the direction from which the assault had come, the curve of an improvised bow in one hand. No sooner was Jim steadied on his feet when there began, raining on them from above, a hail of stones and rocks and branches, all smacking and popping on the plastic of their hard hats. Looking up, they saw several figures darting this way and that, about the topmost branches, agile as monkeys, making whooping cries to match. "Oh, you!" cried Vinny. "You up there! Get out of them bloody trees right this minute! This here's private property, bought and sold, and you're no disturbing the bloody peace. No harm here. Get out of them bloody trees, sharpish! No, I says, no!" Even as Vinny yelled at one tree climber in particular, an object like a brownish stone was hurled straight at his face. Jim tried to pull Vinny out of the way, but it was too late. The stone crashing into Vinny's face and revealing itself as not a stone at all, but something softer, if fouler of scent, something that broke into a mess of brown curds across the big man's broad features. He cried with disgust, hectically wiping the excrement from his snorting, spitting features as best he could without getting any more in mouth or eyes or nostrils, but somehow only spreading the filth more glaringly. Vinny gave this up and instead ran at the somewhat smaller tree into whose top the dirt-flinging climber had just leapt. Vinny throwing himself at the trunk and shaking it as best his plump, muscled arms could. The leaves above hissed, rattled, and the figure up there dropped, thumping to the ground at his feet. It was a boy. A boy, some 17 or 18-year-old kid in a tie-dyed t-shirt and denim cut-offs. The boy had no sooner landed on his back, breath knocked out of him, than Vinny was looming above him, kicking the kid hard in the ribs again and again and again. That's enough! Vinny, cried Jim, darting to the bigger man's side and trying to draw him aside. Vinny, no, listen, that's enough. He's just a boy, Vinny. Listen, look, he gets the point. Vinny, that's enough. Somehow Jim managed to draw Vinny back far enough for the boy to curl on his side, grunting with pain. But Vinny was pulling free and beginning a second advance when another figure dropped out of the trees in front of them, this one landing upright with an ululating cry. It was a very different figure. An older man with a long wiry beard and an all but bald head. He was stark naked, save for serpentine tattoos marked over much of his wrinkled, bony body. He darted forward, placing himself between the security guards and the battered boy in the ground, giving more ululating cries and dancing about, arms raised over his head like a grandpa playing monsters with the grandkids. Other security guards had been hastening to the spot, but as the older man danced forward, these hardened professionals began shifting awkwardly backward, Jim and Vinny included. Uncertain eyes helpless to avoid the demonstrative waggle of the man's genitals. The guards were tough guys from rough neighbourhoods where the narrowest possible definitions of proper manhood were strictly applied and policed, and hence the proximity of another man so assertively naked unsettled them as no other form of attack possibly could have. Hardigan, the gaffer, was somewhere at their back, shouting for them to grab the old bastard and get him out the way! Get him out the way now, sharpish! But they would not have been the men they were if they had been comfortable getting hold of another man's nakedness. And thus the naked man danced before them for several seconds, his every step making a brick outhouse of a man stumble awkwardly backward in response, strutting some command for him to move on, but doing nothing to enforce this physically. Meanwhile, other figures had dropped from the treetops, grabbing the injured boy, helping him upright, dragging him away. When the older man saw this, he blew the security guards a kiss, then turned and made a run for it himself. The security guards belatedly gave chase, the naked man giving the occasional wiggle of his buttocks to impede their advance. Soon, with the others, he had disappeared back into the trees. The din of chainsaws and diesel engines at their back had stopped. But Hardigan, who was himself driving Godzilla and was leaning out of his cabin upon it to bark his commands, told Sandy and his boys to get their chainsaws going again. "Come on, boys! We got them in the run! They'll be heading to yonder grove back there! Let's take the fight to them this time! Come on, let's get going!" And so, a fresh round of buzzings, cuttings and fairings began, the team breaking its way deeper and deeper through the wall of trees, the security team keeping watch alongside. Vinny, wiping the remaining excrement from his face, was seized dotways and, well, taking a ribbing or two off the other men alongside, to none of which did he respond with any great show of humour. But the work went unimpeded for the next little while, until, above the endless buzz and crash and grind of the work being done, the thick sweet sawdust stink that filled the air, Jim began to make out another sound. A sound almost like singing, was it? The steel claw of Godzilla began buzz-sawing another line of larger trees out of the way, and as Sandy's team chainsawed and dragged tall bushes aside, the somewhat more open space of a grove just beyond began to come into view, giving Jim his first look at the protesters en masse. The grove was dominated by great ancient broad-trunked trees, like pillars in some half-ruined cathedral. Around each of the larger trees, protesters had roped and chained themselves, their backs to the trunks as they sang out some kumbaya song about saving the planet. And Jim could see they were indeed a broad mixture, from fleece-wearing middle-aged men and women, looking as if they'd come there on a detour from a day out with a local rambling group, to young women done up like goth nightclub witches, to young white guys with hair and cornrows like gap-year backpackers, to more of the bearded crusties. Some further of them, yes, naked or half-naked, loincloths, some of them, tattoos running riot over their bodies, all singing their lungs out in defiance. But this was okay. Jim and the other security guards had come prepared for this. From their packs, they pulled bolt cutters, marching forward, barking out a few words of caution about this trespass on private land and about the need for them to get out of the way of the heavy machinery for the sake of their own safety. Then they began cutting through the chains and ropes and dragging them aside before starting to push the protesters clear of the advancing machinery, diplomatically or otherwise. Such diplomacy and care for the protesters' safety as was feigned was, of course, short-lived. Within seconds, nudges and shoves had become full-on assaults. Several protesters fighting back with kicks, spittings, shovings of their own. This was not, perhaps, the wisest move, with the hard cases and head cases the company had recruited. The rather approximate retaliations from the protesters rapidly met with serious pushes, blows, kicks, and even the occasional headbutt. Deftest of the team with the latter was Vinny, who sent more than one protester sprawling across the forest floor, nose and forehead bloodily split, even as Jim, close by, making his own marginally gentler attempts to divorce tree huggers from trees, called out, "Listen, Vinny, no need, Vinny, listen, Vinny, screw the nut, Vinny, screw the nut." But Vinny went on doing what came naturally, Jim having enough to occupy his attention with the protesters who fought against him. As a result, he only belatedly caught sight, at first from sheerest corner of the eye, of a struggle Vinny was having with a middle-aged woman just pulled aside from chain and trunk. The slighter figure, surprisingly the one to give Vinny serious retaliation, a knee to his groin. Seeing the big man grunt a good couple of decibels above the general din as he doubled up like a bull in a slaughterhouse that had just had its small brain smacked hard. But barely had a faint, involuntary breath of laughter broken Jim's lips than the big man was raging upright again, catching the woman at both her arms, shaking her about, hurling her to the ground, plainly in a mood to foist a still greater pain upon her. Vinny, no, come on, Vinny, no, cried Jim, disengaging himself from his own handful of protester and darting across, feeling what such a man might do to a woman so prone. Indeed, even as the woman tried to struggle upright, Jim saw one of Vinny's steel toe caps aiming straight for her. "No, Vinny, don't! No! Vinny, I'm telling no!" cried Jim, hurling himself sidelong at the bigger man, so hard that Vinny, 1 foot already off the ground, lost his balance and tripped backward over a mossy length of fallen branch embedded in the grass. Vinny fell on his backside with slapstick completeness. Jim, taking advantage of his temporary bewilderment, to take hold of the fallen woman and help her to her feet, urging her to, "No, come on, move on, quick, get out of here, for your own safety. He's a hard case. You've got to get out of here. Come on, can you've got to..." But there he stopped. For the woman, now back on her feet, looked at him with a startlement that startled him, as if both of them had just seen a ghost. The woman's hand fluttered its way awkwardly, impulsively, up to Jim's cheek, caressing it in the thick of all that surging, retreating, regrouping violence, with a lightness of touch one of the woodland's butterflies might have envied. And she said his name, a name he had not used nor heard in such a long while. "Jamie? What the bloody hell do you think you're doing?" This latter was Vinny. Vinny back on his feet, pushing hard against Jim from the side. Jim stumbled, and by the time he had steadied himself, he looked round to see the woman had turned and was running for the deeper trees. "Whose bloody side do you think you're on?" Vinny was demanding. But Jim wriggled free of his gasp and ran after the woman. "Annie! Annie!" he called. But she kept on running. By now the scene in the grove was chaos. Protesters and guards and a few members of Sandy's team who had put down their chainsaws, chasing back and forth like bees from a disturbed hive. Jim struggled his way past, no thought in his head now but that fleeting female figure. Bobbed auburn hair glinting at her back. That female figure who soon reached a dark gap between two of the broadest, oldest tree trunks. Paused an instant to look back at him, then flitted into the dark and was swallowed by it wholly, even as he called her name once more. "Annie!" He hurled himself into the gap after her. But already she was lost to sight. The trunks therein, the spiked bushes, the dense leaves, the rocks and dead wood so tight about him, it was a wonder anyone could have made any progress. Calling her name again, he made a progress of his own as best he could. Not so much navigating a woody leafy labyrinth as tearing such a labyrinth into existence, with the pushing, clawing and blindness blundering of his need to see that figure again. On he went, on he fought, scratched, confused, blind, bewildered, until he left somewhere at his back the previously huge din of the confrontation in the grove. The forest's deep rustling quiet closed itself tight around him, all but deafening. He stopped, gasping, trying to reorientate himself, seeing nothing but forest, nothing but shadow and leaf and moss all around him. Dear God, he thought, they think they're going to cut their way through all this. He recalled Big Sandy's words about cutting down trees all day long and feeling the next day as if the same trees had sprouted up again overnight. Even the cutting he himself had seen Had it happened at all? Had the same trees just grown up again, taller than ever, the moment his back was turned, swallowing like a beast's mouth all those other men in whose company he'd been a moment before? He fought his own way past a randomly selected clump of tangled branches, the better to fight clear of such thoughts, fighting on through the scratching, scraping, hissing silence until abruptly he began to make out a muffled sound of voices. He fought on towards them, and one of the voices at least became more distinctly recognisable. On he pushed, tore, blundered, and suddenly the forest opened up in front of him. He found himself stumbling back into the rear of the grove, even as several chainsaws coughed into life and began buzzing and biting their way through bushes and tree trunks. He saw that all but a last few straggling protesters had been bullied out of the grove, and those remaining were being sufficiently harassed by Vinny and the rest of the security team at the grove's far end to allow Sandy and his team to commence work at this nearer end. But even as Jim approached through clouds of whirling sawdust, he saw Big Sandy abruptly draw back from the large tree into which he had just begun cutting. Sandy turned to the rest of his team and began shouting to them above the din, gesturing with a thick-gloved hand. One by one, the other lads in the team turned off their chainsaws, dragging off their ears the thick headphone-like muffs they wore, and pushing up their goggles. Oh there, the lot of you! Come over here, take a look at this! No, over here, come on now! Sandy was calling to the slowest of his team to switch off their chainsaws' din. As the other tree surgeons approached him, he gave a sidelong nudge of his head and dropped to one knee at the side of the thick, gnarled old tree trunk into which he had begun cutting. "What do you make of this?" he was saying to the others, shoving a finger of his right-hand glove between his teeth to tug the whole glove off his naked hand, then feeling its way along the broad white scar his chainsaw had cut through the wrinkled grey face of the wood. From the paler naked wood exposed past the cut bark, a dark, oily, greasy liquid was beginning to bubble up, to ooze its way slowly down the uncut bark below. Sandy cupped some of the fluid upon a couple of his broad fingertips, raising it, rusty in the morning light, towards his nostrils and giving it a wary sniff. "Now what the hell do you think this is here?" Sandy asked of his team, holding up those greasily stained fingertips for their closer inspection. "What is it?" said one of the other chainsaw boys, stepping closer, giving his own vague sniff. "What is it, Sandy? What is it? It's sap, resin. What else would it be?" "Sap, resin," said Big Sandy, giving it another close sniff. No. Listen, laddie here, I've been a tree surgeon my whole working life, and I'm telling you, this here isn't sap." Sandy gave another sniff, then turned back to the tear in the tree trunk, more and more of the dark reddish fluid now seeping forth. Sandy cupped this time a whole handful, giving it a sniff and then a little lick with the sheerest tip of his tongue, his great broad bearded face wrinkling with distaste. "Sap! Resin! No, lad. This isn't sap, it's... Why, it's mere like... He looked to them all. Why, it's mere like blood. What happened next happened so fast that in the instant no one of the many looking on could be quite sure what had happened at all. But on recollection, Jim could only conclude that a great wrinkled branch from further up on the cut tree trunk had writhed its way down like some beast's spasmodic limb or tentacle even, wrapping itself around Big Sandy's throat and swiftly, chokingly wrenching him onto his feet, onto his tiptoes, and then tugging him onward up off the ground entirely, Sandy's legs kicking after the ground he had lost. Sandy's broad hands caught hold of the choking limb, trying to tug it away from his constricted throat, even as his face began turning purple, then purplish blue, legs kicking every which way as he was lifted. 5 feet, 10 feet, 15 feet off the ground, choked throat, gasping, grunting for help! Help me! Help me, boys! Help! 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 Even as those at the tree's foot began a belated step or two forward, the branch gave Sandy a still harsher range, higher into the air, and a sharp crack. 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 Split the forest air, echoing like a split in as much sense as the world made. Sandy gave a last spasm and then hung there, swinging slightly in the branch's creaking grasp. His face, insofar as it could be seen from so far below, a blind crumple of a thing. The only movement left in him, a few stubborn twitches, in one dangling foot. The twitches soon spent themselves, and he hung there utterly still and silent and dead. A couple of glinting drops dripped past the sole of one of his swinging feet, spattering one of the chainsaw boys below and making him jerk back, feeling it was blood. But no. It was only a few stray drips of urine from Sandy's trouser leg, gleaming as they fell in the forest's morning light like beads of honey. All onlooking, workmen and protesters, had fallen silent and still. But in that stillness, the birds resumed the singing they had broken off at first sound of chainsaws and engines and the lower human struggle. And that, folks, is the end of Act 2 of Dryad. Join me next time for Act 3, in which, as our middle act, I shall lead you into the very heart of this forest. This magical, mysterious, uncanny, and, as you've just seen, potentially deadly forest. So folks, yes, I hope you've enjoyed our spot of storytelling today. Please join me again, yes, for Act 3 of DRYAD.